Let us begin on a quiet evening in a Brooklyn neighborhood where the streetlights flicker on one by one. The year is 1935, and a child named Alan Stewart Konigsberg is about to open his eyes to a world of brick facades and fire escapes. The air carries the smell of damp sidewalks and distant coffee. On Avenue J in Flatbush, the shops are closing, their awnings rolled up, and a few late pedestrians walk slowly home. The clatter of a passing trolley echoes softly off the brownstones. This is the landscape that will settle deep into a young boy's imagination. Inside a modest apartment above a storefront, a family lives in close, warm quarters. The living room is small but orderly, with lace curtains and a velvet sofa whose fabric has been worn smooth by years of use. A radio sits on a side table, its dial glowing amber. The boy, Woody as he will later be called, hears the murmuring voices of his parents and the occasional laugh from a comedy program. Already he is learning the rhythm of words and silences, the way a pause can make someone lean in closer. The streets of Midwood are his playground, but they are also a stage. He watches the grocer stacking oranges in a careful pyramid, the barber sweeping hair into a pile, the old men playing checkers on a folding table. Every face is a character, every gesture a piece of timing. The afternoon sun casts long shadows between the row houses, and the boy lingers under a candy store awning, turning a nickel over in his palm. The world feels small and safe here, held within the grid of tree-lined streets. In the local movie palace, the Sanders Theater, he discovers a second home. The velvet seats are worn but comfortable, and the ceiling is painted with faded celestial designs. As the house lights dim, a hush settles over the audience, and the beam of the projector cuts through the darkness above their heads. The screen glows with black and white images of sophisticated gentlemen and quick-witted ladies. He sits in the center section, third row back, neck craned upward. The dialogue sparkles and moves faster than any conversation he hears outside. He begins to dream in film scenes. Back on the sidewalk, the rhythms of daily life hum steadily. Delivery trucks idle at the curb, their motors exhaling blue exhaust that drifts into the afternoon haze. A neighbor waters her window boxes, and the drops fall onto the metal fire escape with a gentle ping. The boy walks to the corner to buy a newspaper, the ink smell mixing with the aroma of fresh bread from the bakery. Everything is ordinary, yet through his eyes it all seems composed, lit with a golden, tender glow that asks nothing more than to be watched and remembered. Evenings are the quietest treasure. The street darkens and windows begin to glow yellow. From somewhere, a radio plays a swing tune, the melody floating through open fire escapes. He watches from the fire escape landing as the block becomes a painting in blues and ambers. A cat picks its way along a fence top. A couple strolls arm in arm, their laughter soft. In these moments, the young boy stores away the texture of an urban evening, never knowing that decades later he will recreate these very shadows on a movie screen, painting them with light and gentle irony. Night falls fully and the apartment grows still. The boy lies awake, listening to the far-off rumble of the elevated train. The sound is a lullaby, rhythmic and metallic. Outside his window, a neon sign hums a pinkish glow onto the ceiling. He feels a deep affection for this unglamorous, everyday city, its particular brand of melancholy and warmth. That feeling, so simple and yet so enduring, will one day find its way into the soft focus close-ups of his films, as gently as the night spreads over Flatbush itself. Drift now into that same calm. The scene shifts to a small office in Manhattan, the year 1950. A teenage boy with glasses sits at a desk, his pen moving across a legal pad. The window frames a view of other office buildings, their windows catching the afternoon glare. Inside, the light is pale green from a desk lamp, the furniture simple and functional. He works for an advertising agency, writing gags and one-liners for clients, but his mind wrestles with more ambitious comic premises. The hum of the city is muffled but constant, like distant ocean waves against the shore of concentration. His daily commute is a lesson in observation. He rides the subway, cheek pressed against the cool glass, watching the faces in the car. A woman with a neat hat and worn gloves reads a library book. A man in a tired overcoat stares at his own reflection. The train clatters and sways, the rhythm shaking loose his imagination. In those flickering fluorescent moments between stations, he drafts unbidden dialogue in his head, the back and forth of two people who cannot quite understand each other, a pattern that will one day define his comic signature. By his late teens, he is already selling jokes to newspaper columnists, his name appearing in small print. He begins to perform stand-up comedy, not with booming confidence, but with a nervous, intellectual awkwardness that feels disarmingly honest. The spotlight is hot and isolating, but he learns to find a strange comfort in the silence between laughter. A brick wall behind him, a single microphone, a worn tweed jacket, these become his stage elements. And though the audience cannot see it, he pictures them as old friends gathered in his living room. Television soon pulls him into its glow. He writes for variety shows, learning the precise architecture of a sketch, the setup, the reversal, the button. Late nights in the writer's room become a ritual. Empty coffee cups litter the tabletop. The soft ticking of a wall clock measures the hours. Outside the window, the city darkens and the neon signs flicker to life, painting streaks of pink and green on the ceiling. He types, retypes, tears the page out, starts again. This is the quiet workshop where his voice is forged, not in grand gestures, but in the patient sanding of a sentence. Eventually, he steps in front of the camera for television specials, performing monologues that feel more like one-sided conversations over a kitchen table. The set is minimal. A chair, a blank wall, a simple light that casts a single long shadow. He speaks about his failures with women and his anxieties about death, topics that could be heavy but land lightly because of the rhythm he gives them. The audience laughs not at punchlines, but at the familiar shape of human awkwardness, painted in careful strokes of self-deprecation. Off-camera, he returns to the quiet solitude of a rented room. The radiator hisses gently. A jazz record spins on the turntable, its needle catching the dust with a soft crackle. He listens to Sidney Bechet or Jelly Roll Morton, the clarinet weaving a melody that seems to wander like a pedestrian through a city park. The music teaches him about timing, about the space between notes where emotion actually lives. He will later describe editing a film as a musical process, and perhaps it started here, in this room filled with the warm, wobbly sound of a New Orleans band. The years of writing for television and performing in small clubs pass like pages in a well-thumbed book. He has learned to trust the smallest details, the way a cufflink catches the light, the particular pitch of a telephone ring in an empty apartment. These fragments of the everyday become his treasure. As he drifts toward filmmaking, he carries with him not grand theories, but a collection of quiet observations, each one glowing faintly in his memory like the soft blue light of the television screen after the broadcast has ended and the station has signed off for the night. We now enter the early 1960s, when the comedian decides to direct his own screenplay. The setting is a studio backlit dressed to look like a modest New York apartment. The lights are still warming up, emitting a low hum. Props, a hat stand, a framed caricature, a second-hand sofa, sit waiting in the half-light. The director, young and unsure, paces the floor in quiet concentration. He wears dark-rimmed glasses and a thick sweater. The crew moves slowly, checking cables, adjusting the angle of a lampshade. No one raises a voice. The atmosphere is more like that of a library reading room than a Hollywood production. That first film, What's Up, Tiger Lily, is a playful experiment, but the true birth of his visual world comes shortly after with Take the Money and Run. The camera frames a gentle absurdity, a man trying to play the cello in a marching band, a botched bank robbery note. The lens captures the texture of peeling paint and worn linoleum. Everything is shot in a documentary style that feels less like satire and more like a loving catalog of awkward moments. The humor is in the pauses, the concerned expressions, the insignificant objects that suddenly become the focus of attention. The city itself becomes a character. Rooftop water towers stand like quiet sentinels against the pale sky. Fire escapes zigzag down brick walls. The director discovers that morning light, slanting between buildings, creates a pattern of soft geometry on the pavement. He frames his actors in long medium shots, allowing the architecture to breathe around them. A couple argues gently on a park bench, while behind them a nanny pushes a stroller, and he allows both layers to exist equally. The world does not stop for his characters, and that is precisely the point. He finds particular comfort in editing. In a dark, windowless room, the only light comes from the moviola screen, flickering in black and white. Strips of film hang from hooks like vines in a cool cave. He works alone for hours, the click and whir of the machine creating a steady, soothing rhythm. The process is like assembling a jigsaw puzzle where the final image is a mood, not a story. By cutting out a single frame, he can alter a breath, make a glance linger one beat longer, transforming a simple shot into a moment of tender comedy. Between scenes, he walks through Central Park in the early afternoon. The leaves are turning, dappling the paths with patches of gold and shadow. Rowboats drift on the lake, their oars making small ripples that catch the light. He sits on a bench, a notebook open but untouched, and simply watches the quiet ballet of the city, squirrels chasing each other, couples lying on the grass, a lone violinist practicing under a bridge. These pastoral interludes provide a counterpoint to the interior claustrophobia of his comic situations, giving his films an air that is both urban and breathable. The early films receive mixed attention, but the director is learning a vital lesson: pace is everything. He discovers that if he lets a scene run just a few seconds longer than expected, the audience begins to feel a different kind of engagement, one that is more reflective, more personal. A man crossing a street alone, the sound of his footsteps echoing, the camera holding on his back until he becomes a small figure swallowed by the city. These are the quiet signatures he begins to weave into the fabric of each movie, like a gentle rhythm that sets the audience at ease. 2 decades later, these early frames, glimpsed again, feel like sketches for a larger, more luminous canvas. But in their simplicity, they hold a singular charm. The grainy texture of 16mm film, the ambient noise of a real street bleeding into the soundtrack, the slight awkwardness of actors finding their timing, all of these become part of a homespun beauty. As you listen, imagine the soft flutter of a film strip running through the gate, a tiny window of light illuminating one face in a dark room, a story breathing quietly onto the screen. The year 1977 brings a film called Annie Hall, and suddenly the world sees New York through a new lens. The story opens not with a grand panorama, but with a monologue delivered directly to the audience, as if a friend were unpacking his thoughts over breakfast. The sky behind the character's head is a clean, pale blue. The scene is simple: a wooden deck, a hedge, a diffused afternoon light that wraps everything in a gentle, honey-toned warmth. We have left the backlit entirely and are now standing on a real balcony, the city humming softly below. Throughout the film, the camera explores the quiet corners of people's lives. A bookstore interior, shelves filled with volumes that have absorbed decades of cigarette smoke and rain-dampened air. The light from a single pendant lamp swings slightly, casting slow dance of shadows. 2 figures discuss death and art between the narrow aisles, their voices low and intimate. There is no rush. The scene lets the audience feel the rough grain of the wooden floor underfoot, the slight mustiness of old paper, the comfort of being surrounded by words. In another moment, the camera drifts through the streets of the Upper West Side at dusk. Brownstones catch the last orange ray of the sun. The character Alvy Singer stands outside a movie theater, his hands thrust into his coat pockets, and behind him the marquee glows with a soft, nostalgic red. The queue of patrons shuffles forward. We hear the distant bark of a dog and the swoosh of traffic. The city is not a backdrop. It is a living, breathing companion to the conversation. The director understands that love stories are also stories of place, and this city is the quiet third partner in every relationship. The famous scene with a lobster in the kitchen is bathed in a mix of ceiling light and the reflection off white tiles. A pot of water boils gently, steam rising to fog a window. The couple laughs at their own clumsiness, the lobsters scuttling awkwardly across the floor. The camera records this not as slapstick, but as a memory unfolding, the kind of moment you later recall while lying in bed, a smile forming in the dark. The director's great gift is recognizing that these small domestic interludes are, in fact, the entire substance of a life. At the core of the film is the fleeting nature of love, but the treatment is so light it floats like a feather. When the romance inevitably fades, the mood is not sorrowful so much as a gentle autumnal turn. Leaves skitter across a sidewalk. A couple sits on a bench facing the Hudson River, the water silver and calm. The camera holds a respectful distance, allowing the silence to speak. It is a quiet acknowledgement that some things are beautiful precisely because they do not last. The city that witnessed the love remains unchanged, its streets and parks indifferent yet deeply comforting. The film's visual language owes much to the light of a fading afternoon. The cinematographer, a collaborator with a painterly eye, captures the texture of a linen curtain stirred by a breeze, the chromatic shimmer of a traffic light reflected in a rain puddle, the chalky hue of a classical statue in a museum gallery. These images become the lullaby that underscores the nervous comedy. You are encouraged not just to watch, but to rest your eyes upon each composition as you would upon a favorite photograph. As the credits roll, the final image is a reprise of the balcony scene, now slightly altered by memory. The city below is bathed in a warm, golden hour glow, the kind that makes even the most ordinary rooftop water tank look like a piece of sculpture. The man's voiceover speaks of the need for eggs, but we hear beneath the joke a deep affection for the ordinary. And then, gently, the screen fades to black, leaving only the afterimage of a quiet afternoon on a balcony, the sound of distant traffic like the sea. Now we descend a staircase into the soft, cool darkness of a jazz club. The year is 1963, but the scene repeats itself every Monday for decades. A small basement on West 52nd Street, the walls covered in faded posters and worn banquettes. A few round tables with candles inside red glass holders cast flickering light across the faces of the audience. The stage is no more than a few square feet, but it holds an upright piano, a bass, and a small drum kit. The owner of this weekly ritual is a man who found in jazz the same precise, soulful rhythm he seeks in his films. He sits among the other patrons, but unlike them he carries a clarinet case. For years he has been a practitioner, not merely a listener, adhering to a discipline that demands daily practice. The instrument gleams under the low light as he assembles the pieces. The band, a group of seasoned musicians who know each other's every breath, tunes quietly. The murmur of conversation slows. Someone orders a drink, the ice clinking softly. Outside, the city's pace is frantic, but down here time moves at the temperature of a ballad. The first number begins, a slow New Orleans blues. The clarinet's sound rises through the smoky air, weaving around the piano chords. He does not take a featured role. He blends into the ensemble, his eyes half closed. The music is a conversation without ego, each instrument taking a turn to speak. The melody is familiar, an old standard that has been played in 100 such rooms, yet tonight it feels new and tender. The brass overhead light fixture sways ever so slightly from footsteps on the floor above, creating a subtle, swaying shadow on the wall. This weekly performance is not a hobby, but a refuge. In the middle of a film production, with all the studio pressures and editing deadlines, Monday night at the club provides a reset. Here, if he plays a wrong note, he lets it fade into the air without apology. The audience does not come to critique, they come for warmth. The brick walls absorb the sound and give back a resonance like a wooden cello body. You can almost feel the history in the mortar, the smoke of a million cigarettes, the ghost of Sidney Bechet's wail. Between sets, the musicians step outside to the alley where a single bare bulb illuminates the brickwork. The air is cool and smells faintly of cooking oil from a nearby restaurant. They talk about nothing important, a baseball score, the humidity affecting the reeds, the new saxophonist across town. The director leans against the wall, clarinet in hand, his silhouette a long, thin brushstroke against the red brick. This is the unglamorous behind-the-scenes that feeds his art, the honest, unadorned moment of quiet camaraderie. The music has a direct line into his filmmaking. The editing rhythm of a scene can match the syncopation of a jazz tune. He will often cut on a gesture the way a drummer accents a cymbal. The melancholy of a saxophone line finds its visual counterpart in the slow zoom away from a solitary figure on a park bench. And sometimes, he simply drops a recording of a 1920s jazz number over a montage of the city, letting the scratch of the needle become a character itself, a thread of nostalgia woven through the visual fabric. When the final number ends, the applause is warm but not boisterous, more like a grateful sigh. The musicians pack their instruments with care, velvet cloths wrapping each horn. The club empties, the candles extinguished one by one. The director walks up the stairs into the cool night, his clarinet case swinging gently. He stops for a moment on the sidewalk, looking at the stars that manage to pierce the city's glow. Then he turns and walks home, his footfall blending with the city's nocturnal heartbeat. The music lingers in our ears, as soft and reassuring as a bedtime story. We move now into the private workshop of the director, a small study on the Upper East Side. The year is 1980, and the room is filled with the aroma of old books and the faint citrus of typewriter ribbon cleaner. A large window looks out onto a courtyard where a single tree drops its leaves onto cobblestones. Morning light spills across a wooden desk, illuminating a stack of blank paper, a dictionary, and the machine itself, a manual Olympia typewriter whose keys have been worn smooth by decades of tapping. The ceiling is high, the walls are lined with theater posters from European cinema, and the chair is an old-fashioned swivel seat that creaks with every shift of weight. Here, the daily ritual begins early. He rises, has a simple breakfast of cereal and banana, and walks the few blocks from his apartment to this quiet room. On the way, he passes a florist setting out buckets of tulips, a doorman hosing down the sidewalk, the first hint of sun catching the upper stories of the limestone buildings. The walk is part of the composition, a gentle warm-up for the mind. By the time he sits down at the typewriter, the city has already given him a handful of small images that might find their way into a scene. The writing process is slow and meticulous. He types a sentence, reads it aloud, then rolls the paper up to change a single word. The typewriter's bell chimes softly at the end of each line. The rhythm is hypnotic. Tap, 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 ping, swish of the carriage return. Ideas are not forced. They are coaxed out of the silence between keystrokes. A character will reveal herself not through a plot outline, but through a physical detail. Perhaps she always folds her napkin twice before placing it on her lap. The room becomes a cocoon of concentration, the only distraction the occasional coo of a pigeon on the sill. After a few hours, he might pause and look out the window. The courtyard below has a small fountain that does not work anymore but still holds rainwater, reflecting the sky. A woman in a neighboring apartment waters her geraniums. These glimpses of ordinary life are the raw material of his art. He keeps a drawer full of notes scribbled on napkins and the backs of envelopes, observations, overheard phrases, a joke that came to him on the crosstown bus. Later, these scraps will be unfolded and painstakingly typed into a cohesive script, each one a seed gathered on a walk. The typewriter itself is a character. Its presence is solid, mechanical, grounding. It does not beep or flash, it requires deliberate effort. There is a kind of meditation in the physical act of stamping letters onto paper. Mistakes are corrected with a small brush of white fluid, leaving a faint texture. The final script pages will be covered in these tiny, imperfect corrections, evidence of a mind that refuses to settle. His team will later receive the pages, each one dated and numbered, and they will marvel at the neat stacks that represent a year of quiet isolation. Even the room's imperfection is part of the harmony. The chair squeaks, the radiator knocks, the floorboards shift. Yet these sounds do not disturb the peace. They are the heartbeat of an old building, alive and settling. In the late afternoon, the light transitions from white to golden, slanting steeply across the manuscript. The writer might stop then, put on a hat, and walk to Central Park to read. The typed pages rest on the desk with a glass of water beside them, waiting for tomorrow, safe in the stillness of a room that has seen one small, persistent world built sentence by sentence. Decades later, that same typewriter would be dusted and silent, but the scripts it produced continue to flicker on screens around the world. The miracle of this space is not in the fame it generated, but in the simplicity it protected. A man, a window, a machine, and the discipline to sit still and listen to what the day had to say. As you drift toward sleep, picture that sunlit study, the floating dust motes, and the faint click of keys like a lullaby written in ink.